Francesco Forgione, known as Saint Padre Pio, was born on May 25, 1887, in Pietrelcina, Italy, into a deeply religious family. Even as a child, he often experienced mystical visions, which eventually became a norm for him. Although these early revelations were incomprehensible to him, they laid the foundation for his deep faith and spiritual path that he would follow. At the age of 15, young Francesco entered the Capuchin order, taking the name Pio in honor of Pope Pius V, the patron of the city where he grew up. The calling to serve God was a natural choice for him, as from a very young age, he nurtured a deep love for God and the Church. His life in the order, full of humility and dedication, was characterized by strict discipline and rigor, which only deepened his spiritual devotion. Saint Padre Pio, who was known for his intense spiritual life, always attached great importance to the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist and confession. He believed that these were the way to holiness. The Eucharist, for him a symbol of meeting with Jesus, was the center of his spiritual life. Confession, on the other hand, was for him an opportunity for deep reflection on his life and an experience of God's love and forgiveness, further strengthening his spiritual devotion. Stigmata. A month after his priestly ordination, something extraordinary happened to Padre Pio. He was in the garden, praying and meditating in the shade of an elm tree, when Jesus and Mary appeared to him. Suddenly, he felt a strong burning sensation on the palms of his hands and saw Christ's wounds on them. He ran to Father Panulo and said, "Uncle Tor, I beg you, let us pray to Christ to free me from these signs. I wish to suffer, to die from suffering, but let it be in secret." The marks disappeared. The phenomenon repeated itself a year later. Padre Pio described his suffering. In the middle of both palms, red spots the size of a centimeter appeared. This was accompanied by strong, penetrating pain, more intense in the left hand. I also felt pain under my feet. From Thursday to Saturday, and also on Tuesday, I experienced immense pain. My heart, hands, feet, as if pierced by a sword, such terrible pain. Padre Pio prayed to God, asking that the signs disappear. And so it happened. However, they remained invisible. They reappeared after 8 years. The stigmata, which were visible for over 50 years, until the end of his life, attracted many pilgrims seeking spiritual strength and inspiration. Character. An essential aspect of Saint Padre Pio's life was his character and spirituality. Above all, he was distinguished by his deep devotion to God and unwavering faith, which formed the foundation of his daily life. Saint Padre Pio always strived to live according to Christ's teachings, which was evident in his humility, patience, and love for others. The theme of love for one's neighbor played a special role in Padre Pio's spirituality. Empathy and mercy were not just values to him but a true way of life. In his priestly ministry, he always sought to help others, regardless of their life circumstances or the difficulties they faced. Another important trait of Saint Padre Pio was his steadfastness. Despite many hardships, both physical and spiritual, he always remained faithful to his calling. His perseverance and courage served as a source of inspiration and motivation for many to pursue holiness. Saint Padre Pio also displayed profound humility. Despite his extraordinary spiritual experiences and supernatural gifts, he never took credit for the miracles that occurred through him. He always emphasized that he was merely an instrument in God's hands and that the true miracle was God's love and grace. Confessor. Padre Pio devoted himself entirely to the confessional, hearing confessions for 52 years. He was neither a distinguished preacher nor a well-known educator, but he was a master of human souls. Many claimed that he could see into a person's heart. Pilgrims from the most distant corners of the world would wait up to 2 weeks for their chance to confess to him. They pitched tents around the monastery or slept under the open sky, receiving numbered tickets and patiently waiting their turn. The order was maintained by designated stewards. In addition to the extraordinary signs he bore on his body, Padre Pio possessed the ability to see into a person's soul through divine inspiration. This gift often manifested during confession. He would frequently remind penitents of sins they had not confessed. If the omission was unintentional and concerned venial sins, all would end well. However, if someone deliberately tried to conceal their sins, especially grave ones, Padre Pio's reprimands could be severe, sometimes even harsh. On more than one occasion, he would loudly send such individuals away from the confessional. Stories from his life. A miraculous recovery. A 24-year-old woman, Josefina M., lost the ability to move her right hand following an accident. Despite multiple surgeries and the best efforts of doctors, they were forced to admit defeat. However, her father refused to give up. Determined to find help, he took his daughter to San Giovanni Rotondo, where Padre Pio received them and promised healing. 3 months later, on the anniversary of Saint Francis of Assisi receiving the stigmata, an unusual and pleasant fragrance filled Josefina's parents' home. To everyone's amazement, the scent lingered for about 15 minutes. The reason for this mysterious phenomenon soon became clear. Josefina's hand was completely healed. Padre Pio had kept his promise. The general salvation. At times, Padre Pio would appear strangely absent. Those who knew him well were not troubled by this, as they understood that among his many extraordinary gifts, he also possessed the ability of bilocation, being present in 2 places at the same time. This miraculous ability saved the life of Italian General Cardone. After a devastating battlefield defeat, the despairing general decided to end his life. He entered his tent and strictly ordered that no one disturb him. However, to his shock, he suddenly saw a Capuchin monk standing before him, who firmly said, "You will not do this, General." Stunned, the general rushed out of the tent and demanded an explanation from the guard. "Why did you let that Capuchin in?" he asked. But the soldier was adamant, no one had entered the tent. Years later, after the war, when Padre Pio had become widely known, General Cardone finally realized who had saved him. Out of gratitude and curiosity, he traveled incognito to San Giovanni Rotondo. As soon as he approached Padre Pio, the saint recognized him immediately and greeted him with a knowing smile. A blind girl regains her sight. Gemma Di Giorgi was born blind, her eyes lacked pupils. Doctors were certain that she would never see. But on June 18, 1947, the day of her first Holy Communion, which she received from the hands of Padre Pio, something incredible happened. She began to see. She was later taken to a renowned ophthalmologist, who was baffled. Medically speaking, it was impossible. Gemma's eyes still had no pupils. And yet, she could see perfectly. Quotes. One who does not meditate is like someone who never looks in the mirror and, therefore, does not strive to appear clean. They may be dirty and not even realize it. A person who practices meditation and turns their thoughts to God, who is the mirror of their soul, seeks to recognize their shortcomings and correct them, to control their impulses, and to order their conscience. Remember, a mother teaches her child to walk by supporting them at first. But then, the child must learn to walk on their own. In the same way, you must guide yourself with your own reason. In the spiritual life, one must always move forward and never go backward. Otherwise, we become like a boat that, instead of advancing, stops, and then the wind pushes it back. Let us strive to learn to recognize and honor God's will in all human events. The Eucharist. For 58 years, the daily Eucharist was the center of Padre Pio's life. He would rise in the middle of the night to prepare for it, and after its conclusion, he spent long hours in thanksgiving prayer. No one in the church remained indifferent to what was happening at the altar. Many priests later admitted that it was only in San Giovanni Rotondo that they truly understood the meaning of the Holy Sacrifice. Padre Pio's Mass often lasted over 2 hours. The faithful followed every movement with deep emotion, losing all sense of time. The priest moved slowly, as if carrying an invisible burden. It was evident that he was suffering. This was no ordinary ritual, it was a true sacrifice. Those present felt as if they were truly climbing Golgotha and standing at the foot of the cross. Beads of sweat appeared on Padre Pio's forehead, and tears streamed from his eyes. The most difficult moment was the consecration. At times, the overwhelming silence was suddenly broken by the sound of sobbing or the loud confession of a regained faith. The sight of his pierced hands lifting the host deeply moved everyone. Whoever attended a Mass celebrated by Padre Pio would never forget it. His last Mass took place on September 22, 1968, the day before his passing.